The crystal vase shattered against the marble floor, sending shards skittering across the foyer like diamonds scattered by a furious god. "Are you blind or just incompetent?" Elena's voice cut through the mansion's silence, sharp enough to draw blood. She stood at the top of the grand staircase in a designer dress that cost more than most people's annual salary, glaring down at Margaret, the housekeeper who had served the household for 15 years. "I can see dust on that chandelier from here. Dust." Margaret's hands trembled as she knelt to gather the broken glass. "I cleaned it this morning, Miss Elena. Don't talk back to me." Elena descended the stairs slowly, her heels clicking like a countdown to execution. "You're fired. Pack your things and get out." The front door opened, and Arthur stepped inside, his expensive suit rumpled from a long day of board meetings. He barely glanced at the scene unfolding before him, his phone pressed to his ear as he nodded absently at whoever was speaking. At 45, Arthur Blackwood had built an empire from his father's modest fortune, but somewhere along the way, he'd stopped paying attention to what was happening in his own home. "Arthur," Elena's tone shifted instantly, honey replacing vinegar. She rushed to him, pressing a kiss to his cheek that he accepted with the enthusiasm of a man checking off a to-do list item. "Darling, we need to discuss replacing the entire staff. They're absolutely useless." Arthur waved his hand dismissively, already heading toward his study. "Do whatever you want, Elena. Just handle it quietly." Elena's smile was triumphant as she turned back to Margaret. "You heard him. Out now." The older woman fled, tears streaming down her weathered face, and Elena surveyed her domain with satisfaction. She moved into this mansion 2 years ago as Arthur's girlfriend, and she'd spent every day since then remolding it to reflect her vision of power and luxury. The staff who remained had learned to move like ghosts, invisible unless summoned, terrified of drawing her attention. 2 days later, Sarah Martinez arrived at the service entrance carrying a single worn suitcase and clutching a vintage locket around her neck. She was 28, with kind eyes and an earnest smile that seemed almost out of place in the cold grandeur of the Blackwood estate. The employment agency had called her that morning with the position, and though the pay was modest, she needed the work desperately. Elena intercepted her in the kitchen, looking her up and down with unconcealed disdain. "You're the new girl. You look even more pathetic than your photo suggested." "Good morning, Miss Elena. I'm Sarah, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to." "I don't care." Elena thrust a piece of paper into her hands, a list written in sharp, aggressive handwriting. "Clean every bathroom in the West Wing by noon. Polish all the silver. Reorganize the library alphabetically by author, then by publication date. The gardens need weeding, and I want the pool deck scrubbed on your hands and knees. If you finish before dinner, maybe you'll keep this job past today." Sarah glanced at the list, her heart sinking. There were at least 16 hours of work itemized here, and she had 6 hours to complete it. But she simply nodded, tucking the list into her pocket. "I'll do my best, Miss Elena." "Your best won't be good enough." Elena smiled coldly. "It never is with people like you." As Elena swept away, Sarah took a deep breath and got to work. She moved through the mansion methodically, noticing details that others had missed. In Arthur's study, she found family photographs hidden behind stacks of financial reports, pictures of a younger Arthur with a kind-faced woman who had his same gray eyes. In the formal dining room, she discovered a child's drawing tucked into a drawer, a crayon sketch of a garden signed Arthur, age 7. And when she finally made it outside to tackle the impossibly overgrown garden, she found something that made her heart ache. Hidden behind a wall of thorns and neglect was the skeleton of what had once been a rose garden. Stone pathways wound through beds choked with weeds, and a small fountain sat dry and cracked in the center. A weathered plaque read, "In memory of Catherine Blackwood, who taught us that love grows where we plant it." Sarah knelt in the dirt, her uniform already stained and torn from the day's impossible tasks, and began pulling weeds. She worked past sunset, past the point where her back screamed and her hands bled from thorns, because something about this forgotten place called to her. The next evening, Arthur worked late in his study, his head pounding from hours of contract negotiations. Elena was out at another charity gala, or was it a gallery opening? He stopped keeping track. The house was silent except for the ticking of the antique clock his mother had loved. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Mr. Blackwood." Sarah stood in the doorway, holding a tray. "I noticed you hadn't eaten dinner, and I thought you might like some tea and sandwiches. Just something simple." Arthur looked up, seeing her properly for the first time. She had dirt under her fingernails and a smudge on her cheek, but her expression was genuinely concerned. "You didn't have to do that." "I know." She set the tray down carefully, and that's when he noticed what was on the plate beside the sandwiches: chocolate chip cookies, slightly misshapen and clearly homemade. "My mother always said that late-night work goes better with comfort food." He picked up a cookie, and the taste transported him instantly to his childhood, to afternoons in his mother's kitchen. "These are, how did you know?" "I found a recipe card in one of the kitchen drawers. It had your mother's name on it." Sarah smiled gently. "I hope that was all right." For the first time in months, maybe years, Arthur really looked at someone in his household. "What's your name?" "Sarah, sir." "How long have you been working here, Sarah?" 3 days. He felt something twist in his chest. 3 days, and she'd already noticed more about him than Elena had in 2 years. "Thank you for this. Really." "You're welcome, Mr. Blackwood." She turned to leave, then paused. "I've been working on the garden out back, the one with your mother's memorial. I hope that's all right too. It seemed like it deserved better than being forgotten." After she left, Arthur sat in silence, the cookie halfway to his mouth. He couldn't remember the last time anyone in this house had done something genuinely kind without wanting anything in return. Over the following week, Elena's paranoia grew like mold in darkness. She watched Arthur smile at Sarah when the new help brought him his morning coffee. She saw him pause in the hallway to ask Sarah about the garden's progress. And worst of all, she overheard him laughing, actually laughing, at something Sarah said about a bird that had nested in the restored fountain. Elena's response was swift and vicious. The diamond bracelet went missing on a Tuesday afternoon. Elena discovered its absence with a shriek that brought the entire household running. "It's gone! The Harry Winston bracelet Arthur gave me for Christmas. Someone stole it." Arthur emerged from his study, his expression weary. "Are you sure you didn't just misplace it?" "Misplace a $50,000 bracelet? Don't be ridiculous." Elena's eyes gleamed with malicious calculation as she turned to Sarah. You were cleaning my bedroom this morning, weren't you?" Sarah's face paled. "Yes, Miss Elena, but I didn't." "Check her things, check her quarters right now." Elena's voice rose to a fever pitch. "I want the police called. I want her arrested for theft." But something in Arthur's expression had changed. He'd seen Sarah carefully rehang a priceless painting yesterday after cleaning around it. He'd watched her return a $20 bill she'd found under a couch cushion. The accusation didn't fit the person he was beginning to know. "Elena, let's not be hasty." His voice was calm but firm. "I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation." "Are you defending the help over me?" Elena's face flushed with rage. "I am your girlfriend, Arthur. We've been together for 2 years, and you're taking her side." "I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm suggesting we search more thoroughly before accusing anyone of theft." The bracelet was found 30 minutes later in Elena's gym bag, exactly where she'd left it before her Pilates class. But she didn't apologize. Instead, she glared at Sarah with undisguised hatred and retreated to her room to plot her next move. The dinner party arrived like a storm Elena hadn't bothered to prepare for. Arthur's most important investors were coming to discuss a merger that could double his company's value, and he'd reminded Elena a dozen times how crucial this evening was. But when the guests began arriving, it became immediately clear that Elena had done nothing to prepare. The catering company she'd hired had the wrong date. The florist had delivered arrangements meant for a funeral, and Elena herself appeared in a dress so revealing that the older investors' wives exchanged scandalized glances. Arthur's jaw tightened as he watched his carefully cultivated business relationships begin to crumble. One of the investors, a dignified woman named Catherine Lee, whispered to her husband loud enough for Arthur to hear. If this is how he manages his personal affairs, how can we trust him with $1 billion merger? Sarah had been setting out wine glasses when the crisis became clear. She saw the panic in Arthur's eyes, the contempt in his guests' faces, and Elena's oblivious preening. Without being asked, she slipped into action. 20 minutes later, the dining room had been transformed. Sarah had called in a favor from a former culinary school classmate who arrived with enough gourmet food to feed twice their number. She rearranged the funeral flowers into elegant table settings and lit candles to create warm ambience. When one of the investors' wives mentioned loving classical piano, Sarah quietly started a playlist of Chopin and Debussy. Arthur watched in amazement as his guests relaxed, as conversation flowed, as the woman who'd questioned his management skills laughed at a story Sarah told about her grandmother's cooking disasters. Elena watched too, and her rage became a living thing. "She's just the help," Elena hissed to Arthur as Sarah passed by with a tray of coffee. "Why is she even still in the room? Make her leave." "She saved this evening," Arthur said quietly. "She saved the merger." "I saved the merger. I'm your partner, You forgot about it entirely until the guests arrived." Arthur's voice was cold in a way Elena had never heard before. "And then you did nothing while someone who's worked here for 2 weeks fixed your mistakes." After the guests left, praising the evening and confirming their investment, Arthur found Sarah cleaning up in the kitchen. "Thank you. You went far beyond what anyone could have expected." "I just did what needed doing, Mr. Blackwood." Sarah smiled tiredly, her uniform stained with sauce and her hair falling from its practical bun. "Your guests were lovely. Your mother would have been proud of the man you've become." "How would you know what my mother would have thought?" "The garden remembers her. The house remembers her. Every kind detail in this place carries her signature." Sarah met his eyes directly. "I think maybe you've forgotten, but it's all still here, waiting for someone to notice again." Arthur opened his mouth to respond, but Elena's scream cut through the moment like a blade. They found her in the restored garden, a shovel in her hands and roses torn from the ground scattered around her feet like wounded soldiers. She destroyed hours of Sarah's work in minutes, had trampled the memorial plaque, and kicked over the fountain Sarah had so carefully repaired. "This is what I think of your pathetic little project," Elena shrieked at Sarah, her face twisted with hatred. "You think you're so special. You think you can replace me. You're just the help. You're nothing. I rule this house." She raised her hand to strike Sarah, and Arthur's voice cracked through the air like thunder. "Stop it." Elena froze, her hand still raised. Arthur walked past her without a glance and positioned himself between her and Sarah. "You're right, Elena." His voice was eerily calm. "Sarah is the help. She helped me remember what kindness looks like. She helped me see what I'd let my life become. She helped me understand that I'd rather live with someone who cares about my mother's garden than someone who only cares about my credit card statement." "Arthur, you can't be serious." "I had the security footage reviewed after the bracelet incident." Arthur pulled out his phone, showing Elena a clip of herself placing the bracelet in her gym bag before screaming about its theft. "I've also reviewed the household accounts. Did you really think I wouldn't notice the $100,000 in unauthorized charges over the past 6 months?" Elena's face went white, then red. "You're going to humiliate me over money, after everything I've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me, Elena, besides spend my money and abuse my staff?" Arthur's voice was surgical in its precision. "You're fired. Pack your things and leave. You have until tomorrow morning." "You can't throw me out. We're partners. I have rights." "You have the rights of an employee I'm terminating for cause. My lawyers will be in touch about the money you've stolen. Now get out of my sight." Elena lunged toward Sarah one more time, screaming obscenities, but Arthur caught her arm. "Security will escort you to your quarters. If you touch her, if you even look at her again, I'll have you arrested for assault. Are we clear?" The fight drained out of Elena like air from a punctured tire. She was escorted away, still screaming threats and promises of revenge, but her voice grew fainter with each step until finally, silence returned to the garden. Sarah stood among the ruins of her work, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Blackwood. I never meant to cause problems. I should leave too. I—" "Please don't." Arthur knelt beside her, beginning to gather the torn roses. "Please stay. This place needs someone who sees it as a home instead of a trophy. I need someone who reminds me that not everything valuable comes with a price tag." They worked together in the moonlight, replanting what could be saved, clearing away what couldn't. And for the first time in years, Arthur felt like he was finally doing something that mattered. 3 months passed like seasons changing. The house transformed slowly, subtly, but completely. The remaining staff no longer moved like frightened shadows. Light-filled rooms that had been kept perpetually dim to protect expensive furniture. And in the garden, roses bloomed in a riot of colors that would have made Catherine Blackwood weep with joy. Sarah no longer wore a uniform. She'd become something the house had never had before. Not quite staff, not quite family, but something in between that felt more right than any rigid category. She and Arthur took their morning coffee in the garden now, discussing everything from business strategy to the novels they were both reading. On this particular morning, Arthur found her deadheading roses, her hair pulled back in a ponytail and dirt under her fingernails as always. "I have a question," he said without preamble. "Just one," she smiled without looking up. "Would you have dinner with me tonight? Not as my employee, as someone I'd very much like to know better." Sarah finally met his eyes and her smile was radiant. "I thought you'd never ask. I had to make sure you were staying because you wanted to, not because you felt obligated. I stay because this place feels like home, because the garden needs tending, because—" She touched the locket at her throat, the one she wore every day. "Because my mother always told me that the best things in life aren't found in palaces or mansions. They're found in places where love grows like roses, wild and beautiful and impossible to kill, no matter how much darkness tries to choke them out." Arthur took her hand, dirt and all. "Your mother sounds like she would have gotten along well with mine." I think they're both probably smiling right now. In the distance, the mansion stood against the blue sky, no longer a monument to wealth but simply a home. And in the garden where Catherine Blackwood had once planted love, new growth bloomed from old roots, proving that some things were worth more than any price tag could measure. The story of the mistress who thought she ruled the house had ended. The story of the pure heart who helped restore it was just beginning. If this story reminded you that kindness is never wasted and that true worth isn't measured in dollars, hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment telling us about a time someone showed you unexpected kindness. We read every single one. And like this video to help others find this reminder that the best things in life can't be bought, only built through genuine care and connection. New stories every week that prove love, integrity, and kindness always win in the end.